Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is Mainline Executive Coaching ACT. We are very excited to have you here. This is going to be an extraordinary podcast that we're doing today. It's going to be different than what we normally do. We've talked about this for months and months and months. This leadership survey that we've offered you that you can take, and we have one of our people that have taken this. A lot of people have taken this, but this is a great friend of mine who's come on. He's volunteered. Don't know if we'll still be friends when we're done. But in the meantime, we're going to assume that we're still friends at this point. I'm Michael Bailey. This is Rich Barron, my partner. And let me introduce to you Mark Dayton, a dear friend. He has taken the MLEI. We're going to look at we're going to unpack it a bit, and he's going to give us his response to the whole process to give you a better insight of what this is all about. So, Mark, why don't you take a few moments here, introduce yourself. I'm telling you, this is one of the people that has taken this MLEI whose results, his scores are extraordinary. I mean, they truly are extraordinary. I'm not blowing smoke at all. They are extraordinary. He's an extraordinary man, extraordinary leader. And there's been some very interesting insights that he's gotten out of it nonetheless. So, Mark.
Well, thank you. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here today. And thank you, Michael and Rich, for the invitation. These are extraordinary men that we're dealing with here, and such great insights and wisdom that I've gained from working with them. And so it's just really a privilege to be here. My quick background: have an undergraduate degree in finance from Brigham Young University and an MBA from University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And then first part of my career was with a Fortune 100 company, a large conglomerate, various management positions there. And then I did a stint on Madison Avenue, actually, at a PR and marketing agency there. And then segued over into the technology business and ended up in Silicon Valley and worked for 3Com there, then transferred to Novell when Novell was a hot company and did a stint there. Then I jumped out and did my own startup company. I was the CEO of a software startup company in the medical space. And since then, I've done a lot of consulting in various, mostly software technology companies. And so it's been a great ride, and I'm just really thrilled to be here.
Mark, yeah, that is very impressive. You've written a couple of books. Tell us about those books, the titles of them, and a little bit about what they're about, just again, give some more flavor to who it is you are.
Oh, yes, thank you. I discovered this writing talent along the way that I never really thought about or trained for, but it's turned out to be a really important part of my life. I've written 4 books so far. First book was a management book it's called the Phase 3 Fulcrum. And it's a book about helping technical people. This was mostly in the software industry, where really successful technical people thought they wanted to get into management. And so this was a book that was based on some Harvard research that we wrote that helped them navigate that and decide really whether or not they could and should make that transition. And then the next 2 books were more self-improvement type books. The first one was called 5 Keys to Unlocking the Gift in the Wound. And that's about turning those really difficult times in your life and challenges into some of your most important learning opportunities. And my most recent book is called What's My Who? And I just noticed a lot of people are really struggling with their identity, with who am I and where do I belong in this world, and what's my mission here. And so it's a book that really explores that in depth and helps people get in touch with who they were born to be and what they were born to do on this planet. And then my last little book, I started a tradition of writing a Christmas book for my family and friends. And so the first one is called Frederick's Christmas Concert, and it's based on a true life experience of a friend of mine who escaped Nazi Germany as a child. So,
wow.
There you go.
Well, that's extraordinary. I'm really glad you told us all that, Mark. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. That's great stuff. Truly a man of substance here. Okay. We're all the time here, Rich. Anyway, let's get going on this. This is
we got all the time in the world.
Tell us about when we first started. We do. Tell us when we first started talking about MLEI, what your impressions were, and then when you took it, and then when you got your results back, what was that kind of like for you? And then we'll talk about what was it like to unpack it.
Honestly, Maikel, if it wouldn't have come from you, I would have thought, okay, it's another one of these, kind of tests, maybe a personality kind of test or whatever. But coming from you, Maikel, and Rich, as I got to know you, I thought there's got to be a lot of substance to this. This isn't just another somebody's idea about how to think about these leadership and these kinds of things. So when I got into it, it was very straightforward, very thoughtful, very easy to work through. And the thing that kind of caught my attention, Maikel, when you explained it to me, was like you said, just work through it, answer the questions, but there's no going back. Once you finish a page, you're done. You move on. And I thought, okay, there's some methodology there. I'm sure there's a lot of testing and methodology that goes into that. But I went through and I found that the questions to be very insightful and just very, very easy for me to work through it and take that test.
Good. Yeah, it is. It's only 20 minutes, and it is very straightforward. You just follow the directions. You'll just do great. No wrong answers really. And then when you got back the test and we started unpacking it for you, that's part of that. What was your response to that?
We were talking about this before the podcast, and Maikel, you made the comment that this goes many levels. There are many levels of depth to this and to the training that accompanies it. And I guess that was there were kind of three things that really struck me when we did the unpacking. That was the first, and I just started to realize, wow, there is a lot to this. There is so much meat here. There is so much thought and depth that I hadn't experienced in other programs before. So that was the first thing that caught my attention. The second thing was that it is vetted with a very, very large, and I would call it a very prestigious type of database. This has been vetted with leaders from around the world, and I don't remember the number. Is it 20,000 now or some large?
It's over 12,000 right now.
Over 12,000. Okay, a large number of leaders who have taken this and validated it, and then their leadership styles have been validated in real life as you over the years as you've watched this unfold. And you even mentioned to me before as you were unpacking it in the early days, this was administered to people like Steve Jobs and people of that caliber. So they are part of that mix and part of that database of feedback that you're getting back and that you're being compared to. And so for me, that was really exciting to know that from that standpoint, that this is being evaluated and fed back to you from a database of truly world-class leaders. So that's the second thing that really caught my attention. And then the third thing was, as you explained to me, the leadership styles and where I fit into that model. But then you took it to the next level and talked about not only the styles where I was strong, but also there is a method to it, and there is a path and an order that is important to make those styles really be at their best. And I had never run into that before either. That was so unique, and it made so much sense to me that not only just having the aha of understanding, okay, this is where I'm strong, this is where I'm not so strong, but then how do I actually apply that in a methodical pathway kind of application to really maximize my capability. So those were off the top of my head the things that really struck me.
That's great stuff. That's great thinking on your part. And you're right. There's so many times that people get kind of close. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes there's really they're kind of missing what their main leadership style is. And so they're kind of off on that. And if you don't get that entry point right and then understand what that natural unfolding of the map, it really makes a difference in terms of stress. It just kind of mixes things up, and it actually ends up making you work harder to be a leader because you're kind of out of sync with yourself. So if you pull it back and say, okay, this is really the leadership style that's most natural to me, and you get with that, all of a sudden you start noticing bad habits, but you also start which you then can correct, because those are the derailers. Those are the things that trip us up, right? Then you correct that stuff. All of a sudden, there's a whole other kind of feel and play about being a leader. And I mean being a leader, not just being in a leadership role.
Well, and it makes it so manageable too, because there are so many moving parts to leadership, and it kind of feels like other times that I've worked, or other programs and things that I worked through, it's kind of like I feel like I'm a beginning golfer, and it's like, keep your head down, don't bend your elbow, stance, and it's just like, okay, there's too much. So when you're in this situation, do this, and when you're and you end up basically just freezing because it's overload. But this made so much sense to me. It's like, okay, this is for this kind of situation you're dealing with. This is what you're really good at, but you need to start here, focus on that, follow this path to the next step, and then follow it there. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that is so powerful. And I can wrap my mind around that, and I can actually focus on it in the moment, in the trenches when things are happening, and really make some progress with it.
You mentioned that you've made some changes just from taking the MLEI and then going through it and now knowing what it is and being better acquainted with those different maps. What have you done differently since then?
A few things that have been really kind of life-changing for me. And surprisingly, I didn't expect it, actually. So the first one is that it's really given me clarity on what my strengths, what my leadership strong points are, and where I'm not so strong, right? Which isn't a huge aha for some people, maybe. But to me, it's so important to know not only what to focus on, but what not to focus on. And that was maybe one of the biggest insights for me. It's like, okay, these are where you are really, really good. And so this is where you can focus and really have an impact. And so it's really helped me to have clarity on don't spend your time and your energy on those things, on those other things, but here's where you can really excel. So I would say clarity is one of the really most important things that it helped me with. Second thing how it's kind of changed my life is just confidence. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, having been evaluated with that group of world-class leaders, and then having the feedback that says, well, in this area, you are like really, really strong. You're at in this category of great leaders. It's kind of like, in the morning, when I get up and I'm having a little bit of a down day, or I had something go wrong and I'm feeling a little discouraged, and I can look in the mirror and go, dude, you are a Steve Jobs executive, come on, snap out of it. And there's credibility, that's been super helpful. That's been really, really helpful. The other thing is and I'm really anxious to dive more in depth with the training and that kind of thing. And as we were talking earlier before the podcast, Maikel, about as you work through it at a deeper level, the insights and the understanding that come from it, but just the tools. I've done other programs where do the evaluation, here's where you stack up, blah, 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 blah. And then they pat you on the head and send you out into the world. And so you got to try to figure it out on your own. And you don't usually do very well with that. And a couple of months later, you're going through your bookshelf and you go, oh yeah, I took that course, and there's the binder on in the bookshelf. But to me, this has these tools that are so practical and so powerful, where you can say, okay, enter here, go down this path, apply these tools until you get there, and then you can switch to these tools. And it's so practical. It makes so much sense.
If I may interject, and then you can complete your thoughts. One of the things many of those other kinds of assessments do is they peg you as a leader. This is your leadership style.
Yeah.
And they just leave that with you. This is how you are. This is the way you'll lead. And it's kind of static. That it's like set in cement. That's just it. And one of the things that we found with the MLEI is that entry point is just the start.
Yeah.
It is just the beginning of helping somebody understand their leadership potential, where to go, how to develop it. All of a sudden, and we're going to do this with you in just a few moments, instead of being stuck, we know that 80%, 75%, I guess, of leaders out there are really struggling. They have one, maybe two leadership styles. And one of those styles is do it just because I told you so, which is not really a leadership style. It's just a leadership position. And there's probably the reason they were, promoted was there was some style that the organization recognized that this is a good thing they have,
right.
This particular one. Interestingly enough, that person may not always recognize that is why they promoted them. They don't necessarily see it, understand it,
right.
lack
right.
of self-awareness. And so people are struggling with, well, who am I? Who am I as a leader?
Right.
And what am I supposed to do? They're struggling in that thing that you talk about in your book. Who am I and what am I to do here? And they're not often very successful. Actually, the failure rate is really quite high. And there's that other level that's about 20% that have 2 to 3 leadership styles that they've pretty well mastered. They're pretty good at that. Then there's that last group, 5%, that actually probably have like 4, 5, 6 leadership styles that they're really quite good at. They're very flexible. They can pivot. They know it. They're second nature to them kind of stuff. But somehow they figured out how to move through those intricate maps. And so we'll show that to you in a few minutes, how you could take just one and suddenly we're going to blossom it into 4 just immediately. These are the 4 things that are just your potential that we can start developing right now, which is very exciting. So I just wanted to interject that. So please continue.
Absolutely. Thank you. There was one other point I was going to make about other programs that I've done. Also, to your point, Maikel, where you kind of get painted into a leadership style or a leadership box, which I experienced. But also the flip side of that is it feels a little manipulative, because the flip side of it is they often say, well, this is your leadership style, and if you're dealing with somebody else that has the different leadership style, then you need to change so that you can interact with them. And it just starts feeling to me very manipulative and chameleon-like, rather than being, no, this is where you're really strong, and this is how you can use it in really being effective in any kind of situation. So I just love the authenticity of it that I think is very powerful. I talked about the validation. So it's validated, it's proven, it's got a track record. And then the last thing is, I just think it's the perfect setup for the continued coaching and a deeper dive into actually practicing it and being coached through those situations.
Yeah, because that's great. I like you because now you have some baselines. You have some knowledge about not only information or stuff, which is all over the place, all over the books and tapes, not anymore tapes so much, but podcasts and TED Talks and the internet, all that kind of stuff. But now it sets up a whole situation in terms of, how do I do it? How do I work?
Yes.
What works best for me? That's great stuff. Before we go into, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that a lot.
I'm sorry?
I appreciate all that you've said.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, before we take a look, we're going to take a look at Mark's, if that's okay. Is that okay if we look at your MLEI results? I mean,
Yeah, that's fine.
Really extraordinary this fellow is. Any comments you'd like to make, Rich?
Well, I think before we get into that, Maikel, let me pull up, and I want to show this slide about the will of intelligent leadership.
Sure.
So we can explain that a little bit before we get into where we're going with Mark's, if that's okay.
Sure.
So what I want to, and I'm going to describe this the best I can to our listeners, but we'll also have this up on our YouTube channel, Mainline Executive Coaching ACT. So the reason we have talked so much about this inner core assessment, which is really what this MLEI is, and which stands for Mattone Leadership Enneagram Inventory. It was developed by our good friend John Mattone, who's the world's top executive coach. And as Mark mentioned, he used this with Steve Jobs, he was his executive coach, Roger Enrico of PepsiCo, Bill Logue of FedEx. Those are just a few of the ones that Mark has mentioned that's in this database. And so many global leaders have used this to start their personal journey. So let me explain this to you. We start with what's called an inner core assessment, which impacts what we call the outer core. And the outer core is made up of critical thinking, decision making, strategic thinking, your emotional leadership, your communication skills, your talent leadership, your team leadership, your change leadership, driving for results, your driver, and critical thinking. But really, where do those things come from? Now, when you take some of these other assessments, which we do have other assessments which work in conjunction with the MLEI, just to show how accurate it really is. But to do this, you look at that outer core, and that's really what people see in this. Those things I just mentioned. But where do those skills truly come from? And that's why we start with this inner core assessment, because that inner core is really made up of, your elements of your character, your self-concepts, which in turn drives your values. It drives your beliefs. It drives your references, which in turn drives your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavioral tendencies. Now, that's in turn what really gives that outer core, those skills in the outer core that we're talking about, life. That's where that comes from. For example, I'm a high driver. My predominant style is a driver. And that's great. If someone were to come up to tell me, your predominant style is a driver, fantastic. What does that truly mean? Where did that come from? What happens when I'm exhibiting really high levels of emotional intelligence around that driver versus what happens if I start to derail? What happens when those stress levels hit? That's what this MLEI does. It drives deep down to those different layers of who you are as an individual and where your leadership styles come from. And so that's the important aspect of what this MLEI is about. Prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Now, so if we were just to start at that outer core and say, Mark, hey, you scored really high as a communicator. Good on you. Here's your certificate of achievement. Off down the road you go. And it's just like you said, in about a week, then you're going to be going, now what? Now, where does this truly come from? And so that's why we start where we start from. So let's go back to your MLEI results.
Actually, let's keep it there. Let's keep it there since we got this on the thing. Let's kind of take a look at this, and we'll go back and take a look at the actual results. So if you would, please, I'm going to ask you to point on these different outer core of behaviors, also leadership styles. I think this is actually a much better setup than what we talked about earlier, Rich. Mark's natural leadership style is over on this right side called the strategic thinker. No, excuse me. The emotional leader. The emotional leader. And that's really important. Which you watched Mark here earlier in the podcast, you saw this guy that was just, excited and just, ebullient and just sharing stuff. I mean, that is the perfect shot of somebody who is an emotional leader. They are excited. They want to do things. They're engaged in things and they want to get the team going. They want to get other people excited about what they're doing. Him being in marketing is like, that's perfect for him. That's just perfect. Interestingly, while the MLEI showed that is his most active style, it's not the one that he's most confident about, which was really interesting. His most confident one, which is a few points behind his strongest one, was the decision maker. Now, there's a real distinction between somebody who is a decision maker and somebody who is an emotional leader. And I'm just kind of sharing this with you folks so that you get a little bit of an idea, feel for these different leadership styles. Decision makers tend to be kind of perfectionistic. They tend to be a little bit didactic. They tend to be a little bit rigid. They just like, well, this is what you have to do, this is what you're supposed to do, and all that kind of stuff there. And then there's certainly a level that for healthy decision makers in an organization that's really, really valuable. But you notice that kind of thinking, and then you look at Mark, who's that emotional leader, who's much more freewheeling. He's much more spontaneous. He's much more, I'm excited about stuff, that got to get everything just exactly right. And so what's interesting about this for him is that when you take a look at if he goes into that decision maker, he puts himself as a disadvantage because he's hobbling himself, because he has the belief at that point you got to do things just exactly so. Where the real Mark is much more freewheeling, much more emotional, much more, let's just see what happens. Let's just go make things work and that kind of stuff. Let's get excited about it. Very, very different. Not that one is better than the other. For Mark, that's the best place for him to enter in his leadership map. So when we start taking a look at that, that's his position. And then what we want to do next is, what can we do to strengthen that? What can we do to then expand that power base? And so that he can either go from the emotional leadership. So if you put that cursor on there, Rich, on the emotional leadership.
Yeah.
And then he can either go into, depending on how his score is, either into a strategic thinker or into a communicator. I'm going to just check his scores here. What's the artistic? And so his power base goes from the emotional leadership, the guy who's excited. Let's go do something. Let's go do something fun. Let's all get on board and get this thing going here, into a guy who's very creative. Again, that's perfect for somebody who's in marketing. So just in the initial movement here, we've said, okay, Mark, a better place for you to put your attention, your focus. Don't be the right, wrong guy, because that just kind of hangs you up. Be the guy who's excited. Be the guy who's authentic. Be the guy who's like, yeah, I am competitive. I like to win. I like challenges, and I like technology, and I like all that cool stuff learning. And I'm also going to be very creative about it. I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to be, see, if you notice that, I'm going to do things differently is very different than the decision maker who is kind of didactic, got to do it exactly right. Yeah. So right there, boom, boom, we've got two leadership styles working. The next move for him is across there into the team leadership. Now, this is interesting. Now you're starting to see Mark's map. When Mark does the homework, and you got to do homework as leader, why are we excited? Why do we want to do this? What's the benefit for us? Why are we getting all jazzed up about it? And then why are we going to do this in an interesting, different kind of way? There's that communicator style, that creative stuff. It's called the artist. When he does his homework about getting excited and looking at the message here about what it is that he's going to bring over to the team, what he brings are two leadership power bases over to the team to start working with the team, to get them to start working, thinking as a catalyst. He's acting as a catalyst to get the team excited, to get them to get buy-in, to get their ideas going, how we're going to do it, what are the steps, what are the plan. He brings a lot of stuff over. So he's got boom, boom, emotional leadership, communication leadership, the artist, now moving into the team leadership. That's his third. Now remember, how great leaders, really exceptional leaders, how many leadership styles do they have? Probably 2 to 3. We're already mapping out 3. Just in this quick little thing, we got 3 we've already lassoed in. So when he goes to the team, he's bringing a lot of power, a lot of focus, a lot of energy, a lot of ideas from which they can play, they can build on the catalyst kind of stuff. And then from there, he goes to the very top, to the critical thinking, where he then takes a look at it and says, how are we doing? How is it going? So he's moved through this all of a sudden from emotional leadership, communication, the artist, into team leadership, that's 3, into the critical thinking, that's his map, this particular map, and he has 2 or 3 others that we could map out. We're not going to go there right now. But all of a sudden, within a few short minutes, we have laid out his level of how he can play at a great level, at the 5% leadership level of being a leader, just in a few moments. That's the power of this tool, this survey here. And we can actually go, as we work with you, should you decide to take it, we'll start building layers of maps where all of a sudden you're starting to see not just 4, you'll start seeing 5, 6, 7 of these leadership potential, because they're all within your bailiwick. These are all your potential. Now, the secret is, what are the entry points? What's the map? What's the direction you go? And then how do you develop them? So it's all a matter of your desire and your ambition. You're willing to work hard. But you can see why this fellow is just an extraordinary man, because of these leadership styles that he has been working at for some time now. And we just tweaked it a little bit. If you go this way instead of that way, bada boom, all of a sudden, here's what happens. Greater excitement and confidence and clarity for him. His team, because he's projecting clarity and confidence and courage, they pick up on that. They're more courageous. They've got greater clarity. They've got more confidence in what it is that they're doing, because that's what he's bringing to them. Innovation, creativity, all those wonderful kinds of things. And then his ability to take a look, stand back and take a look and just say, so how are we doing? What's really happening here? That's excitement. And when you just consider that, if you understand it and you start learning these ways that you are, and then applying the tools, really getting them into you so that it's becoming second nature. Once you start doing that, the idea of being a faux leader, the idea of being an imposter, you've just blown all that out of the way, because we've shown you how to be absolutely 100% authentic, congruent with yourself, which reduces stress, which reduces worry, which reduces anxiety, and just builds confidence and courage. Let's go do it. Let's get it done. That's what the power of this is. So, Mark, I'd like to hear a little bit about how that's working for you. And then again, Rich, let's your comments, and then let's just show them what the kind of report that they get, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, well, there are 2 things that really jumped out at me. One was, as Rich explained, it isn't just looking at those leadership strengths, but actually going to the core of who you are. And that was so important to me when you first gave me the feedback, because that is so meaningful. That is what drives everything else. And so that's one of the things that I think is so powerful about this approach, is that it's getting to that core, getting to those core beliefs and what it is that actually drives you, and then goes out into the leadership styles. So I think that's extremely, extremely powerful. And then the paths, I mean, it's so cool to just think about being able to be on a path and not get hung up or stopped or started on the wrong foot in the first place in an area where, Maikel, to your point, I can think of times where I have let perfectionism just like eat me up, because that's an area that can be a rabbit hole for me. But having this map to step back and say, no, this is where you start, and then you go here, and this is another great area of strength for you, and then you go here, and it all works together. It's just so much more powerful and easy and authentic to be able to make a difference in an organization. I love the approach.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Well said. Rich.
Mark, I'm going to ask you a question about something, because I'm curious. You've had a lot of experience at the C-level, a lot of experience starting your own company, currently in a C-level position. So my question to you would be, do you feel this is helpful for someone who's been in your position for years and years? Is that something that C-suite people can learn? Or, do they know it all already?
It can help anybody. I think a lot of times people innately do some of this, but I think a lot of times people stumble around a lot as well and cause a lot of friction and a lot of needless waste in organizations. I can think of an experience just recently where decision making was just grinding because people in the decision making roles didn't understand some of these principles. And it's not that they weren't capable, it's just that they were in the wrong place doing the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of corporations that kind of works its way through because just, inertia and sheer willpower or urgency to get things done. But there's so much anxiety and brain damage along the way that just doesn't need to happen. And so any C-level person, if they understand this, instead of flopping around, you can actually go here, 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 and it's just so much more effective.
All right, well said. Let's show the folks what it is. One of the pages that Mark got on his report, and it can be anywhere depending on what your results are. It can be anywhere from like 35, 45, 50 pages. As you can see down there at the bottom of this table there, total average maturity is 0.433, high level of maturity. This is really quite a stunning number. You can see at the top there, we talked about his the moral leader, the decision maker, 0.633. That's like through the roof. You can see that. And so what you've got are these 9 different areas that we saw before on that intelligent leadership, intelligent wheel, now put into this table here. And the yellow one will indicate to you, you can see if you look at the numbers and the score, 42, and that score next to the emotional, that competitive leader, that emotional leader, 42 is this high number, which means that's what he does the most. It's what he's most inclined to do. It's proclivity. It's his natural way of doing things that tells us that's where the talent is. So 42 is that one that is really, that's Mark. And then to the side in that maturity ratio, that what it really is talking about is the level of confidence. Overall, Mark has an incredibly high level of confidence in his leadership. I wouldn't imagine we're going to get over time a whole lot of these in this range. But nevertheless, the point is, no matter where you are, this is a place to start. It's a place to work from. It's a place that we can help you just in the process of now knowing those baselines, knowing those scores, knowing where you start and then where you move. That changed the whole thing, the whole play, the whole story, the whole how it all works for leadership completely changes it up. So that's what we wanted to show you. Any other comments? Then we'll let Mark and then Rich, you can wrap it up here for us.
Again, this is just, it's so, I've heard leadership talked about and trained and everything else for much of my career. And it seems like it's all over the map in many cases. And to me, this just brings it all together in a quantifiable way that is usable and actionable, and really makes a difference for me as an individual and for my organization. So kudos to everybody involved with this. It's really a pretty amazing system.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Rich?
I just wanted to point out, Mark, you mentioned something earlier that on your down days, you look in the mirror and you think, man, I'm done the same test as some of these great leaders. I want to tell you that your score, 0.433, is in the 100th percentile of those 12,000 people have taken this. So, this is really an exceptional result. And what's great about this is how much you've been able to learn from this, but yet brought all this skills and talents over the course of your career to the table, and it shows. It absolutely shows in the results here, but it also shows, there are places I can still work on, places I can still develop. And so that's one of the great things about this MLEI is it not only does it proves to people where their strengths lie, but it also shows them this is where I can improve. And if it also laying out these maps, going in the right direction is so critical to those leadership skills. Going backwards in those maps, which is what we find a lot of people do, creates that stress, creates that derailing properties, creates those issues in the organization. So again, Mark, thank you so much for being here today and explaining this to us and explaining your experience with this MLEI.
Well, thank you. Again, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm just really excited to continue the process and to continue to learn and get better, and to learn from people like you who have such great wisdom and insight. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mark,
and
thank
to your
you.
point, Mark, and for everybody who's listening, with what we've talked about today and what we've shown today, that's just scratching the surface of what we actually do with this MLEI. So we're just showing the basics, and what we dive into this a lot further into these maps. And so we invite you to join us, invite you to share the same experience.
Very good. And Mark, are we still friends?
Oh, absolutely. Even better.
All right, brother. You got it. Thanks so much. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If they want to get hold of us, what do? There it is, Executive Leaders, ACT-ILEC.com. Thank you for joining us today. Keep spreading the word, and keep coming back. And we thank all of you, wherever you may be, anywhere in the world. We appreciate you. We love you. We want to help you. Let us know how we can. Till then, all the best.
All right. And take care, and we'll see you again next time.